Which team do you want to talk about next?
Let's go in order. So let's go with the Boston Celtics.
Okay. So what are your thoughts about the Celtics?
Well, statistically, the Celtics actually have a better offensive and defense, slightly more defensive rating than the number one seed Bucks. But I do think in terms of their roster overall, they're a deeper team, in
Mhm.
my opinion, versus the Bucks. I just think their star players are more mature
Yeah.
and are more experienced, which kind of gives them that competitive edge, right? Because guys like the Bucks have recently won a championship, so I think that experience alone adds a lot of value to the team. I mean, the Celtics are playing well. Jason Tatum is having an MVP caliber season, averaging like 30 points a game, with almost 9 rebounds, almost 5 assists. Great production from
Mhm.
him, as well as with Jaylen Brown having a fantastic season, averaging 26 points a game, 7 boards. Uh, great, great defensive player. Makes plays on offense as well. See, yeah, I mean they acquired like a guy like Mike Muscala, which is going to be not a lot of people are going to talk about him. They also add he's someone that they can utilize in certain sets as he's generally a good 3 point shooter,
Mhm.
and then has some depth with guys like Derek White who could score off the bench. I believe you mentioned earlier like Grant Williams got injured, but he usually offers a lot of a great puzzle plays, a great defender.
Um, it was Robert
Robert
Williams who
Williams,
got
okay,
yeah,
Robert
injured. Yeah.
Williams, the other Williams, which Grant Williams, regardless, Grant Williams provides them great defensive plays, a lot of hustle plays there, and then when Robert Williams was healthy, also a great front court defender.
Yeah.
And obviously,
So
with Marcus Smart leading that offense with
yeah.
solid production.
Yeah, I think in terms of to your point, in terms of like their top seven, I think when healthy, the Celtics probably had the best top seven players rotation in the
Mhm.
NBA, right? Not just amongst the top three in the East, but they had the best top seven rotations, right? If you have Smart, White,
They also have
Brown,
Brogdon. I keep
Tatum,
forgetting. Yeah,
Tatum, Horford, Williams, Brogdon, right? They have the best top seven. Um, One thing that helps them this year is that they are top five offense and they are top seven defense. They kind of slipped in the beginning of the year. They were a top three offense and defense, so they've slipped a bit since the beginning of the year. And quite frankly, one of the reasons why they've slipped is because they take a enormous amount of 3 point shots. They are second in the league in 3 points attempted. Granted, they shoot it at a fairly good clip, it's like 37.5%. But on days when they're not hitting the threes, those are when they are vulnerable, right? But in terms of their top end talent, they have amazing talent. And for me, I've been high on the Celtics since the beginning of the year because I believe in their defense. They every every player on their team in the top seven rotation wise can defend. They are Some are good defenders and some are great defenders, and they are also long and very versatile, and they can play man to man, and they can switch everything, right? So they have so much defensive flexibility, right? And they obviously on offense they have two great wing scorers, but they also have shooters all around.
yeah. You know what's crazy is that they technically have Gallinari, but he's out for the season. But imagine them also having Gallinari on top of
Yeah,
everyone else that they already have,
I
right?
even if Gallinari was healthy, I don't think that he would play in the playoffs much, to be quite frank with you, because I feel like the Celtics would just play their top seven, eight players. And I don't think that unless it's like emergency or foul trouble or garbage time, I don't think that Gallinari would have played much on this team just because it doesn't feel as though like he fits like he wouldn't be able to like hold up on the defensive end, basically. Right. That's just
True, but I
my
think he can give a spark with a couple of shots. I mean, because he's going to have a lot of open opportunities, right? He's not going to have to work for his shots as much as he did, in his earlier career.
yeah, I feel
So I
like
think that would make a big difference, and
I feel
he
like
could
if
just
he
be the
was
spot up shooter.
yeah, I feel
Shooter.
like if he was healthy and Grant Williams was cold, then they would just bench Grant for the rest of the game and just go with Gala if Gala hits a few shots. That's my assumption, but that's neither here or there since he's out for the year.
Right.
Now in terms of weaknesses, um, the weaknesses that they had. Okay, I'm gonna say two things. One, they need Robin Williams healthy, right? Like
Robert.
he's
Okay.
Robert, sorry. So him and Peyton Pritchard, who's more like their ninth man, but he's like Peyton Pritchard can play, man.
Yeah,
Like
no,
it's unfortunate that he is like the fourth guard, the fourth or fifth guard on this team. But if he was like, I don't know, like on the Hornets or on the Spurs, like he can easily put up high teens, like 18 points a game. Like he can play, but him and Robert Williams are both out for at least the next 2 weeks. So one obvious weakness is health, but that's something that's obvious across all teams. The one thing the Celtics, the two things that are the main weaknesses of the Celtics is one, I kind of mentioned earlier, they do get three happy. They do
it's
get
not
three
necessarily a
happy.
personnel issue. It's more like
Yeah,
them just kind of uh, shooting too many threes,
yeah,
and depending on how well they're shooting their threes that game,
yeah,
essentially dictates
yeah,
whether or not they're going to win, depending
yeah,
on how good or bad
yeah. And
the opponent playing.
especially when you if they play the Sixers, they cannot get three happy because the Sixers do not have good perimeter defenders, especially at the guard spot. They need to take advantage of that and not settle for threes. Now, the second weakness, in my opinion, is their coach. People have, I feel like people forget that he was not the head assistant last year. He was a second assistant. And Mazzulla, based on the games that I've watched, I watched maybe 7 or 8 games of the Celtics since the All Star break, right? Um, what I've noticed is he does not make good substitutions and provides good counter lineups whenever the Celtics are down or whenever their opponents make adjustments. I've I've seen him stick to like his standard starting five without making an adjustment, or if they would go 7, 8, 9 minutes and they would fall behind, their players might be looking a little tired. He would not call a timeout, either to give them a quick breather, to make a quick substitution, just stuff like that you see very subtly because there's especially against the Nets and the Knicks and the Cavs, right? All these games, went the distance or went into OT, and he just rode his starters, just rode them out, right? And there were so many times throughout the game where, I felt like he needed to make adjustments, but I feel like he just stuck with the 5 players that he was comfortable with. Sometimes 6 if you include White, and he didn't make the proper adjustments. There was times when White didn't enter the fourth quarter, the final 6-7 minutes, and especially when against Cleveland when Donovan was cooking, like you want to have as many perimeter defenders as possible, right? So having White on the bench was confusing to say the least. So I think the lack of coaching experience is going to really show up in the playoffs because Budenhauser and Doc Rivers have so much more experience as head coaches, and they both have won championships as head coaches. Whereas Mazzulla, again, he was the second assistant coach. He wasn't even the first one, right? So I do think that the talent of the Celtics has been able to hide Mazzulla's flaws, if that makes sense. But I worry in the playoffs, when you have to make a key substitution, when you have to make a key play call, when you have to do a key set, whatever that is, I question whether he has the experience to make those adjustments, make those quick decisions, right? So that's my biggest concern for the Celtics.
No, I have to agree with you. Like as I mentioned earlier, I don't really think the Celtics have a personnel issue necessarily. Overall, their team is
Yeah,
pretty good,
agreed.
pretty
Agreed.
strong team. Maybe
Yeah.
I guess they're in terms of offense, their big men aren't the best scorers, I guess,
Mhm.
right? I mean, Al Horford's like their best guy, and he's 37, so like he's still a solid player. But like I mean, Robert Woods, if when healthy, he's not necessarily the best offensive player either, right?
Mhm.
And neither is, I mean, some of the other guys barely get minutes, right? So so like that's probably pretty much their only flaw. But outside of that, since the league isn't necessarily big man oriented anymore, they can kind of ride with their very deep rotation currently, right?
Yeah.
But again, as you mentioned, them being trigger happy with 3 pointers can be to their detriment. Just games in general, not just the playoffs, right? But also in the regular season, as we've seen so far. But also, the inexperienced coach. But at the same time, that remains to be seen. So we'll see if he's able to make these adjustments in the playoffs because he hasn't really been in that situation yet. So I don't want to write someone off when they're
Yeah.
not in that situation. Maybe like what if they lose like the first 2 games against who they play against, and
Yeah.
he's gonna have to figure it out. Like whoever they playing against, like
Yeah.
like what kind of
Yeah.
lineups he should put against certain lineups. How do you make in-game adjustments when
Yeah.
the opposing player like a star player on the opposing team is cooking, and we that remains to be seen. So we'll see how
Yeah.
he adjusts in the playoffs. But other than that, like I mean, the Celtics are still a really
Yeah.
talented team, and they're they're still an extremely talented team. They're probably gonna remain the second seed. I don't think anyone's going to be dethroning
Mhm.
the Bucks,
Yeah.
at least in terms of playoff seeding. So
Yeah. So just to kind of bring home the point, if the Bucks, sorry, if the Celtics play the Bucks,
right,
let's say it's game 5, the game is tied, fourth quarter, 2 minutes left, and the Bucks go up by 2, they make a basket. Now at this point, it's on the coach to call the right play, make sure that you call the right defensive sets to guard Giannis, make sure that you put your best offensive players in position to score, right? And to counter whatever defense that you see the Bucks is playing on Tatum and Jaylen. Those are the moments that we've never seen him do that, and we haven't seen him do that well in the regular season, right? So that's what I'm really pointing to. I'm not really worried about like the first 3 quarters of coaching, 3.5 quarters of coaching. I'm more worried about like, because it's going to happen, right? When they play the Bucks or the Sixers, late game execution, late game play calling, late game adjustments. That's what I'm really paying attention to.